The debt was paid in fire. Deathworlders unleashed Captain Yoon Sejun stood at the observation deck of Harmony's Rest, watching the endless dance of starships coming and going through the station's massive docking rings. The station served as the largest neutral trade hub in 3 sectors, a place where species who would never share a planet could share a meal and make deals. Without bloodshed, 5 years had passed since the day that changed everything. The day his freighter picked up a distress signal from a dying colony ship carrying 3,000 Valori, refugees fleeing a war that had consumed their homeworld. He remembered the radiation alarms, screaming as his crew worked without rest for 18 hours, pulling survivors from failing life pods while their own ship's hull groaned under the stress. He remembered holding a dying Valori child in his arms and promising her mother that they would make it. That humans never abandoned anyone. They lost one crew member that day, a young engineer named Kwon Daein, who refused to leave the reactor room until every last refugee was aboard. Her sacrifice bought them the time they needed to jump to safety. The Valori matriarch Thasani had knelt before him afterward, her forearms pressed against the deck in a gesture of absolute submission. And she had spoken words that no human had ever heard directed at their species before. I declare a life debt between my people and yours, a bond that cannot be broken until the stars themselves grow cold. What you have given us, we shall repay with everything we have and everything we are. Sejun had tried to refuse, tried to explain that humans did not save lives expecting payment. But Dasani had simply smiled with those strange crystalline eyes and said that refusing a life debt was not possible in Valori culture. Now those same Valori lived in a community section of Harmony's Rest, 3,000 souls who had built new lives among the stars. And Sian visited them whenever his shipping routes brought him through the sector, but today something was wrong. Could feel it in the way the station's usual bustle had gone quiet, in the nervous glances exchanged between merchants of a dozen species, in the sudden departure of ships that had been scheduled to stay for days. Captain Sejun. He turned to see Dasani hurrying toward him, her crystalline skin flickering with colors he had learned to recognize as fear. Behind her came a dozen Valori, their eyes wide with the same terror. "They have come for us," Dasani said, her voice trembling in a way he had never heard before. "The Keth Dominion has sent a fleet, and they are demanding our surrender as reclaimed property." Sejun felt his blood turn cold. He knew the Keth by reputation, a slaver empire that viewed all other species as resources to be harvested, and their cruelty was legendary across the galaxy. "The Coalition will protect you," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were hollow. Thasani shook her head. "The Coalition has already declared neutrality. They say they cannot interfere in what the Keth claim is an internal matter regarding escaped slaves. You were never slaves. We were in their space when the war began, according to their laws that made us their property, and the Coalition recognizes Keth sovereignty over such matters." Sejun's hands clenched into fists as rage built in his chest. He had seen what happened to species the galaxy decided were not worth protecting, and he would not let that fate befall the people he had bled to save. "How long do we have?" "The Keth have given us 72-hour ultimatum. After that, they say they will take what belongs to them by force." Sejun was already walking toward the communications hub, his mind racing through possibilities. The Valori followed him, hope and desperation mixing in their expressions. A Coalition official intercepted him before he reached his destination, a tall insectoid being from a species whose name Sejun had never bothered to learn. The official's mandibles clicked with what might have been concern or irritation. "Captain, I must advise you not to do anything rash. Humanity is still classified as a minor species in Coalition records, and any intervention in this matter would be considered an act of war against the Keth Dominion." "Intervention?" "We have seen your communication logs. We know you have contacted your homeworld, and we know what you are asking for. Saiju met the official's compound eyes without flinching. Then you know what is coming. What is coming is the destruction of your species. The Keth have conquered empires that have been among the stars for millennia before your ancestors discovered fire. And you think your primitive Deathworld can stand against them? Seonjun smiled, and something in that expression made the official take a step backward. You have clearly never seen what humans do for family. He pushed past the official and continued to the communications hub, where a single message waited for him from Earth Command. Just 2 words that made his heart swell with fierce pride. Acknowledged. Incoming. Dasani appeared at his side, reading the message with confusion in her flickering skin. What does this mean? Seojun turned to face the Valori who had gathered behind their matriarch. 3,000 souls who had survived one apocalypse and now faced another. And he spoke with absolute certainty. It means the debt is about to be paid. Through the observation windows, the first Keth warships were taking position around the station, their black hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. And their commander had no idea that he had just made the worst mistake of his entire civilization's history, and threatened something that humans protected. The debt was paid in fire. Deathworlders unleashed 5 years ago. The stars had been on fire. Lieutenant Park May-Ray had been a junior officer on Captain Seojun's freighter when they picked up the distress signal, a desperate cry for help from a vessel that was dying by degrees. She remembered standing at her console as radiation alarms screamed and the ship's computer listed all the ways their rescue attempt would kill them. She remembered watching Seojun tear off his own environmental suit and give it to a Valori mother clutching 2 infants, even though that meant he would absorb enough radiation to put him in medical for 3 weeks. She remembered Kwon Daeun's voice over the intercom, calm and steady, as she reported that the reactor was failing and that someone needed to stay behind to keep it running. She remembered the silence that followed when they realized Daeun was not asking for volunteers because she had already made her choice. The Valori had wept when they learned what the young engineer had done for them, and Matriarch Dasani had insisted that Daeun's name be spoken in their prayers forever. Myra stood in the intelligence center of Harmony's Rest, watching the Keth fleet tighten its grip around the station like a predator savoring its prey. 47 warships, each one capable of reducing a moon to rubble, all here for 3,000 refugees that most of the galaxy had already written off as acceptable losses. The coalition species were evacuating, their ships fleeing through the few exit corridors the Keth had left open. Merchants abandoned cargo worth fortunes rather than risk being caught in whatever came next. And diplomatic vessels carried away ambassadors who expressed deep concern but offered no help. Thasani found her in the intelligence center, the matriarch's crystalline skin pulsing with colors of grief and resignation. My people are preparing for what comes next, Thasani said quietly. The young ones do not remember slavery, but the elders are teaching them what to expect, how to survive, how to hold on to hope even in chains. Murray's jaw tightened. No one is putting chains on anyone, Lieutenant. I appreciate your sentiment, but we must be realistic. The Keth have conquered species far more powerful than humanity, and the Coalition has made clear that no help is coming. The Coalition does not speak for humanity. And what can humanity do? Your homeworld is weeks away at standard slipspace speeds, and even if your people wanted to help, you do not have the military strength to challenge the Keth. Their commander has made that very clear in his broadcasts. Myra pulled up a holographic display showing the Keth fleet positions, and then she entered a code that only a handful of humans knew. The display shifted, revealing something that made Dasani's breath catch in her throat. Ships were emerging from slipspace at the edge of the system. Not warships with sleek lines and intimidating weapons arrays, but freighters and mining vessels and cargo haulers. They came in 1s and 2s at first, then in dozens, then in hundreds, all of them broadcasting human identification codes. "What is this?" Dasani whispered. "This is what happens when you threaten people that humanity has decided to protect." The Keth commander's voice crackled over the station's communication system, demanding identification of the incoming vessels and ordering them to withdraw immediately. His tone was confident, even amused, as he noted that the approaching ships appeared to be civilian craft with no military value. Murray opened a channel to the human fleet, and Captain Cyojin's voice came through clear and strong. "All ships. This is Captain Cyjun assuming command of rescue operations. We have 72 hours before the Keth make their move, but we are not going to wait that long. Captain, the Keth outnumber us and outgun us," another voice said. "What exactly is the plan?" "The plan is simple. We make it so expensive to take our people that the Keth will never threaten anyone under human protection again." The Keth commander was laughing now, his translated voice echoing through the station as he mocked the ragtag human fleet. He called them scavengers and primitives and asked if they planned to ram their garbage scows against his warships. Meyer opened her own channel, broadcasting on all frequencies so that every ship and every being in the system could hear her words. "You wanted to see what Deathworlders look like when they are angry? Congratulations, you are about to find out." The laughter stopped through the observation windows. The human ships were taking formation, their running lights blinking in patterns that the Sani could not understand, but that made perfect sense to every human watching. They were not military codes or tactical signals. They were the opening notes of an ancient war song from old Earth, a promise written in light that the enemy would soon learn to fear. The Keth commander ordered his fleet to battle stations, and for the first time his voice carried a note of uncertainty. These humans were not acting like prey, and something in their behavior triggered instincts that even a seasoned conqueror could not ignore. The Deathworlders had come for their own, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop them. The debt was paid in fire. Deathworlders unleashed. The first shot was fired by a converted mining vessel called the Iron Promise, a ship that should have spent its days cracking asteroids for precious metals, but now carried weapons welded to its hull by engineers who had worked without sleep for the entire journey. Chief Engineer Baek Jinho stood at his station aboard the Iron Promise and watched the targeting display light up with more enemy contacts than he could count. The Keth warships dwarfed every human vessel in the fleet, their weapons capable of vaporizing anything that dared to challenge them. But Jinho had not come here expecting to survive. He had come here because 3,000 people who had done nothing wrong were about to be dragged into slavery, and because his species had decided long ago that some things were worth dying for. Battle began in earnest when the Keth flagship opened fire, its main cannon carving a line of destruction through space that claimed 2 human freighters in a single shot. The ships exploded in silence, their crews becoming scattered atoms in the void. But instead of retreating, the human fleet surged forward. Captain Sajin's voice came over the command channel, calm as a prayer. "All ships, execute pattern Omega-7. Make them bleed for every meter." The human ships scattered like leaves in a storm, their movements chaotic and unpredictable in ways that no military computer could anticipate. They dove between Keth formations, used debris as cover, and fired weapons that should never have been mounted on civilian vessels. A Keth destroyer moved to intercept a cluster of human ships, its commander confident that his superior firepower would end the engagement quickly. He did not expect the lead human vessel to accelerate directly toward him rather than away. The ship rammed the destroyer at full speed, its hull crumpling on impact, but its momentum carrying it deep into the enemy vessel's core systems. The explosion that followed took both ships and sent shockwaves rippling through the Keth formation. "Confirmed kill on Keth Destroyer 7. Came the report over human channels. Crew of the Starlight ejected at the last moment. Retrieving escape pods now. But not all crews made it to escape pods. The Iron Promise took a direct hit that disabled its main engines and left it drifting toward a Keth carrier. And Jinho knew immediately what needed to be done. He opened a channel to the bridge while his hands moved across the engineering console. "Captain, the engines are gone, but the reactor is still hot. If I can overload the containment field, we can take that carrier with us. Jinho, we can get you to an escape pod. There is no time, and you know it. That carrier has enough fighters to tear our fleet apart. And this is the only way to stop it." Silence hung on the channel for a long moment before the captain's voice came back. Thick with grief, "It has been an honor, Chief. The honor was mine. Tell my family that I will see them again when the stars grow old." Jinho disabled the safety protocols one by one, his fingers steady even as the radiation alarms began to scream. He thought about his daughter who had just learned to walk, and his wife who had begged him not to volunteer for this mission. And he whispered an apology that would never reach their ears. The Iron Promise struck the Keth carrier just as the reactor went critical, and the explosion lit up the void like a newborn star. The carrier broke apart, its fighters scattering in confusion as their mothership became an expanding cloud of plasma and debris across the battlefield. Coalition observers watched in stunned disbelief as human after human made the same impossible choice. Ships that should have fled instead charged directly at superior enemies, their crews accepting death as the price of protecting those they had come to save. A Keth admiral demanded an explanation from his tactical officers, his voice rising in something that might have been fear. "Why do they not retreat? Their ships are inferior, their weapons are primitive, and they are dying by the hundreds. What is wrong with them?" The tactical officer had no answer because no species in recorded history had ever fought like this. War was supposed to be about survival, about victory, about gain. But these humans seemed to have no interest in any of those things. They were fighting to make a point, and the point was written in fire across the void. Matriarch Thasani stood at the observation deck of Harmony's Rest with tears streaming down her crystalline face as she watched human ships burn and break and die for her people. Beside her, a young Velori child asked why the humans were doing this. "Because we saved them once," Dasani whispered. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were incomplete. The truth was simpler and more terrifying than any debt or obligation. Humans were doing this because it was right, and because no power in the galaxy was going to stop them from protecting the innocent. The Keth commander sent an urgent message to his superiors requesting immediate reinforcements, his previous confidence shattered by the carnage unfolding before him. The response came back within minutes, and it made his blood run cold. "What reinforcements? You said they were primitives." The debt was paid in fire. Deathworlders unleashed Sergeant Choi Yuna had been born on Earth in a small coastal town where the winters were harsh and the people were harder. She had grown up learning that survival meant adapting to whatever the world threw at you, and she had carried that lesson with her to the stars. Now she stood in the airlock of a boarding shuttle, her squad of 12 Marines packed in around her like ammunition in a magazine. Through the viewport she could see their target, the Keth command ship, a massive vessel whose hull was scarred by weapons fire from the battle raging around them. "Listen up," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "The Keth are bigger than us, stronger than us, and they have home field advantage. But they have never faced humans in close combat, and they have no idea what we can do." "What can we do, Sergeant?" asked Private Han Jungwoo, the youngest member of the squad. Yuna smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Everything they think is impossible." The shuttle slammed into the command ship's hull and began cutting through the armor with breaching lasers. Alarms screamed throughout the Keth vessel as the defenders rushed to repel the invasion. Yuna was first through the breach, her rifle already firing before her boots touched the deck. The Keth who had been waiting to ambush them fell before they could react, their bodies crumpling under a barrage that no species was supposed to survive. The corridors of the Keth ship had been designed for beings nearly 3 meters tall, with ceilings that humans could not reach and doorways wide enough to fit vehicles. But what the Keth saw as an advantage, Yuna saw as opportunity. Junwoo, take your fire team through the ventilation system and hit them from above. The rest of you, with me. The Marines split up, their smaller frames allowing them to navigate spaces that the Keth could never follow. They crawled through maintenance shafts and dropped from ceiling panels and emerged from behind. Enemy lines with weapons blazing. A Keth warrior confronted Yuna in a corridor junction, towering over her like a mountain of muscle and armor. He laughed at the tiny human who dared to challenge him and raised his weapon with casual contempt. Yuna did not give him time to fire. She was moving before his finger touched the trigger, sliding between his legs and coming up behind him in a motion that no creature his size could have followed. Her blade found the gap in his armor where his neck met his shoulder, and he fell with a sound of absolute disbelief. "How?" he gasped, his translator rendering his dying words. "We evolved as prey," Yuna answered, stepping over his body. "We learned to fight things bigger than us long before we learned to make fire." The push toward the bridge was bloody and relentless, with Keth defenders falling back at every turn as they discovered that these small soft creatures from a death world were anything but helpless. They did not need environmental suits in conditions that would kill most species. They could operate in temperature extremes that should have been lethal, and they absolutely refused to stop coming. Captain Saijun joined the assault when his shuttle docked at a secondary airlock, his presence on the command channel rallying the Marines who had begun to falter under heavy fire. He fought his way to the bridge with a fury that surprised even his own people. The bridge doors fell after a sustained assault, and Yuna led the charge inside with Saijun right behind her. The Keth commander stood at the center of the room, surrounded by officers who were reaching for weapons they would never have time to draw. "Stop!" the commander shouted, his translator giving his voice a desperate edge. "I offer terms of surrender. We can negotiate an end to this madness." Saejun walked forward until he stood face to face with the being who had threatened to enslave 3,000 innocents, and his expression held no mercy and no compromise. "You came here to take children from their families and sell them like cattle. You threatened to destroy anyone who stood in your way. And now you want to negotiate? It is the civilized way. All conflicts end in negotiation. There is always a price, a compromise, a deal to be made. Not this time. You cannot simply reject surrender. There are rules, protocols, traditions that even the most savage species respect." Saejun leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that the translator barely caught. "We are not savages. We are humans, and we protect our own. There are no terms for slavers." The bridge doors opened again, and Matriarch Thisani entered with a squad of armed Velori behind her. Their crystalline skin flickered with colors of determination and rage as they took positions beside the humans who had bled for them. "Impossible," the Keth commander breathed. "The prey does not fight. We are not prey anymore," Thisani answered. "Your people taught us fear. These people taught us something better." Sojin turned to face the Keth commander one final time, and there was something ancient in his eyes, something that remembered every injustice humanity had ever suffered and every triumph they had ever won. "You asked why we would sacrifice so much for aliens," he said. "The answer is simple. Someone did it for us once, long ago, when we were young and alone in the dark, and we remember." The commander had no response because there was no response to give. He had built his entire worldview on the assumption that all species were selfish. that all compassion was weakness, and that power was the only thing that mattered. He had been wrong, and now he would pay the price for his arrogance. The debt was paid in fire. Deathworlders unleashed. The battle for Harmony's Rest ended not with a bang but with silence, as the last Keth warship surrendered and powered down its weapons. The void around the station was filled with debris and wreckage. The graves of those who had given everything to protect strangers they had never met. Captain Seon stood on the observation deck where this had all begun, watching recovery teams pull survivors from shattered hulls and gather the remains of those who would never see home again. Beside him, Matriarch the Psy stood in respectful silence, her crystalline skin dimmed to colors of mourning. 417, Sejun said quietly. That is how many humans died today, and 3,000 Valori live because of them. The mathematics of sacrifice are cruel, but they are clear. Mathematics have nothing to do with it. Every one of those 417 had a family, had dreams, had a future that they gave away because they believed some things matter more than survival. The Sani turned to face him, her ancient eyes reflecting the starlight. I have lived for 3 centuries, Captain, and I have seen empires rise and fall and rise again. But I have never seen anything like your species. We are nothing special. You are wrong. You are terrifying and wonderful in equal measure, and the galaxy will never be the same now that it knows what you are capable of. The days that followed were filled with the grim work of aftermath. Keth survivors were given a choice between exile to the far reaches of known space or standing trial before a coalition of species who had witnessed their crimes. And most chose exile rather than face the judgment of those they had wronged. The Galactic Coalition sent representatives to negotiate new treaties with humanity. Their previous dismissal of the Deathworld species replaced by careful respect. They had called humans primitives and laughed at their junk fleet. And now they understood how badly they had miscalculated. Memorial service was held on Harmony's Rest, attended by humans and Valori and representatives from dozens of other species who had watched the battle unfold. The names of the fallen were read aloud, one by one, as stars were projected onto the station's dome in a pattern that would be visible from light years. Away Chief Engineer Beek Jinho's name was spoken with special reverence, and his family received the Valori's highest honor, a crystal that would glow with internal light for 1,000 years. His daughter was too young to understand what her father had done, but someday she would know that he had died so that children he had never met could grow up free lieutenant. Park Mirai was promoted to commander and given charge of a new intelligence division focused on identifying threats to human-allied species before they could strike. She accepted the position with the promise that no other species would ever face what the Valori had faced. Alone Sergeant Choi Yuna received a medal that she never wore, saying that medals were for those who wanted to remember glory and that she wanted to remember the Marines who had not made it home. She returned to active duty within a week, training new soldiers in the tactics that had broken the Keth's hold on their own ship, and Captain Sanjung stood before Matriarch the Sai one final time, as the Valori prepared a ceremony that their culture considered sacred. Beyond words, the life debt between our peoples has been paid, the Sani declared, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd of humans and Valori. Your species has given more than we could ever have asked, more than we could ever repay, and we release you from any further obligation. Syed shook his head. I cannot accept that, murmurs rippled through the crowd, and the Sani's skin flickered with confusion. Cannot accept? Captain, this is the highest honor our people can bestow. To refuse is without precedent. Then let us set a new precedent. Debts between family are not paid. They are shared. You owe us nothing, and we owe you nothing, because that is what family means. The Zani stood in stunned silence for a long moment before a new pattern began to spread across her crystalline skin. Colors that no human had ever seen before, but that every Valori recognized instantly. The colors of profound and unshakable love. "Then let it be so," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "From this day forward, humans and Valori are not allies, not partners, not debtors. We are family." The cheering that followed shook the station's hall, as two species who had been strangers became something more. But the echoes of that day spread far beyond Harmony's Rest. Other minor species began reaching out to humanity, seeking alliances and partnerships with the Deathworlders who had proven that they would fight for those they called friends. Some came offering trade, others offering technology, and still others simply offering their hands in friendship and in the depths of Keth space. A survivor of the battle made his report to the Dominion's ruling council. He was old and scarred, and had seen more combat than most species could imagine. But his voice trembled as he described what he had witnessed. "Do not touch what the humans protect," he said. "Do not threaten their friends or their allies or anyone they have claimed as their own. They are not warriors in the way we understand the term. They are something far more dangerous." "What are they?" a council member demanded. The survivor closed his eyes, remembering the fire and the fury and the absolute refusal to surrender. "They are believers. They believe in things that cannot be measured or traded or conquered, and they will die for those beliefs without hesitation or regret. That is madness. Perhaps, but it is madness that broke our fleet and freed our slaves and sent a message that every species in the galaxy has now received." The council fell silent, and the survivor spoke his final words with the weight of absolute certainty. "The Deathworlders remember their friends, and they never forget their enemies." Across the galaxy, the word spread in whispers and warnings, passed from traitor to diplomat to soldier to spy, until every species in every system had heard the truth. Humanity had announced itself to the stars, and the stars would never forget the fire that had paid the debt.